Modern moviegoers have quite the enviable problem. There are more great films being released every month, perhaps every week, than anyone with a full-time job and other hobbies can possibly keep up with. And over the past year, these are without question the most ignored major movies. I'm Ellie for What Culture here with 10 recent movies nobody watched. Number 10, Night Bitch. Though it was hyped throughout 2024 as a probable major awards player for Amy Adams, Night Bitch came and went without making much of a dent this past December. The black comedy horror film stars Adams as a stay-at-home mother who comes to believe that she's turning into a dog at night. An amusingly edgy concept and one based on Rachel Yoder's hit novel of the same name. Despite all this clout and the reliable Marielle Heller serving as writer-director, Night Bitch received only a cursory awards qualifying theatrical release from Disney. Even so, its global theatrical grosses totaled a mind-bogglingly low $170,737. And amid mixed reviews from critics and general audiences alike, Night Bitch quickly slid out of streaming charts following its recent debut on Hulu. Though Adams did receive Golden Globe and Independent Spirit Award nominations for her committed performance, the film's polarizing nature ultimately ensured that few outside of the cineast contingent actually bothered watching it. An unfortunate fate for a film that many pegged as a fierce Oscar contender for much of last year. Number 9, The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. While it's clear that some people watched a movie that grossed $20 million worldwide, that's also a pitifully low number for a franchise as storied as The Lord of the Rings. Across its 6 Peter Jackson-directed live-action installments, the series' box office has averaged almost $1 billion per movie. And so for Warner Brothers' recent anime, The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, who grossed just $20.5 million globally, is nothing short of an embarrassment. Given the tens of millions of die-hard Rings fans around the world, it seemed like this modestly produced $30 million animation couldn't really fail. Except The War of the Rohirrim was only fast-tracked into production to ensure that New Line Cinema didn't lose the rights to J.R.R. Tolkien's novels. And so there was little actual interest in releasing a quality product and marketing it adequately. As such, this new installment received a bare minimum marketing push, and with mixed reviews to boot, landed with a thud at the box office. It failed to recoup its cost theatrically, but considering it did allow New Line to hang on to the Rings brand, that cost was surely a drop in the ocean long term. Number 8, Queer. Luca Guadagnino's films rarely end up making a profit at the box office. But even so, his most recent film, Queer, is by far his costliest box office flop to date. The Daniel Craig starring adaptation of William S. Burroughs' 1985 novel cost $50 million to produce. Almost as much as Guadagnino's previous film, Challengers, which had far wider commercial appeal. Even with the filmmaker's cred among cinephiles and much buzz surrounding Craig's award-courting performance, Queer sank like a stone commercially, netting just $4 million worldwide. Even accepting that few pegged this as a film to light up the box office, that's still a poor result. The massive budget certainly didn't help any, and honestly it's tough to see where all that money actually went. But even so, in terms of tickets sold, this thing did shockingly little business. Which is a shame because it's one of the year's boldest and most distinctive films, while boasting the single best performance of Craig's career. Number 7, Azrael. Horror is one of the most reliably lucrative of all movie genres, and so it was surprising to see a new Samara Weaving starring outing with an intriguing hook straight up tank at the box office. Azrael is an action horror film starring Weaver as a woman who finds herself facing off against a violent cult in a world where nobody speaks, resulting in a rare horror with very little spoken dialogue. The compelling dual selling points of Scream Queen Weaving and the lean dialogue-free execution suggested a possible modest breakout success. But IFC Films ultimately only released Azrael in 762 theaters in North America. Combined with a limited global theatrical release, the film only cracked $617,280 worldwide. A baffling figure, given the tendency for even not great horror fare to make a few million. Though Azrael was released on horror streaming service Shudder shortly after hitting big screens, it was basically dumped without much fanfare. And going by the lack of social media chatter, failed to rustle up much attention at all. It's an unfortunate outcome for a movie that, while plenty flawed, still made for an interesting sit. Number 6. Sasquatch Sunset. Now, unlike Azrael, it's not terribly surprising that a card-carrying art house movie in which Jesse Eisenberg and Riley Keough portray Sasquatches failed to get many eyeballs on it. Sasquatch Sunset premiered to strong reviews at last year's Sundance Film Festival, though despite releasing in an unexpectedly sizable 856 US theaters back in April, more than Azrael, bizarrely, it grossed just $1 million. A film like this was obviously always going to have limited commercial appeal, and while it was clearly made for a low yet undisclosed budget, it's a shame that something so well acted and crafted with such artistry hasn't had much play at all outside of hardcore film lover circles. Again though, it's far from a surprise. Many probably took one look at it and assumed it was a comedy rather than a drama. All the same, one can only hope that the film finds itself a bigger audience as a cult classic at home. Number 5. Sing Sing. With its near universal critical acclaim and glowing awards hype, it seemed like feel-good prison drama Sing Sing would be an easy box office hit, especially with its mere $2 million budget. Yet A24 categorically bungled the movie's rollout this past summer, launching it on a highly limited release, ensuring that even much of the cinephile community couldn't find a screening near them. It's been theorized online that A24 simply lacked the resources to sufficiently promote numerous major awards players, and so put all their efforts into the decidedly surer thing that was The Brutalist. Even so, that a film as warm and crowd-pleasing as Sing Sing grossed just $3.5 million globally is a crying shame. And to make matters worse, A24 withheld its streaming release for more than 6 months after its theatrical debut. And as such, is it any surprise that the film has struggled to maintain serious awards momentum in recent months? It was never given a chance! Number 4. Saturday Night. It's not unfair to say that Sony vastly overestimated the interest in a film about the origins of Saturday Night Live, because despite boasting one of the most enviable and eclectic ensemble casts of the year, Jason Reitman's Saturday Night fizzled out in record time. Even with rapturous reviews following its Toronto International Film Festival premiere, where some awards analysts deemed it a major Oscar contender, Saturday Night tanked on its general theatrical bow. Sony confidently gave the period comedy a wide release in North America, but it ended up grossing just $9.8 million against a $30 million budget. Ultimately, it seems like Sony felt that the project might appeal to both older and younger SNL viewers, yet the numbers indicate that few were prepared to leave their house to actually watch it. With its disappointing box office came a more modest reception from the wider critical body. And in terms of major awards, it's landed only a Golden Globe nomination for lead actor Gabriel LaBelle. Since its release back in September, word has gone quiet on this one basically overnight. Number 3. Boy Kills World. On paper, action comedy Boy Kills World looked like it had the potential to become a low-key breakout success. What with its wild spin on the typical revenge movie formula, insane action sequences, and left-field personality. Lionsgate evidently thought so too, as they sent it out on wide release in the US last April, only for it to end up grossing a pitiful $3.3 million worldwide, a pittance of its low $18 million budget, before being pulled from circulation just 6 weeks after release. For a hyper-violent R-rated action film with a great cast, that's a shocking outcome. Granted, Boy Kills World was barely marketed, and its talented ensemble wasn't exactly packed with A-listers or performers who are mega popular on social media. All the same, despite receiving mixed reviews, it really seemed like something so over the top and visually distinctive would become a modest success commercially. Since it flopped, it's been quietly discarded onto streaming services, where it's also been largely ignored, sadly. Hopefully, audiences might discover Boy Kills World if the algorithm gods work in its favour sometime down the line. Number 2. Better Man. No movie on this list is more brutally, frustratingly underseen than Better Man, the wildly unexpected biopic of pop music legend Robbie Williams. Despite the film having the attention-grabbing hook of portraying Williams throughout his life as a CGI chimpanzee, as a metaphor metaphor for how Williams views himself, it's turned out to be one of 2024's biggest box office bombs. Even with rave reviews from critics, Better Man has struggled to bring in audiences all over the world. Now, while it's hardly surprising that the lavish $110 million biopic flopped in North America, where Williams is little known, Better Man also saw a mediocre performance in even the UK and Australia, two of Williams' most popular markets. At the time of press, the film is sitting at just $14 million grossed worldwide, barely 10% of its budget, and suggesting an outright rejection from audiences en masse. It's a sad, if not unpredictable, outcome for a bold and superbly crafted film that, in its attempt to differentiate itself from other musical biopics, perhaps alienated those who would have flocked to a more conventional dramatization of Williams' life. Of all the films on this list, though, none deserves to find an audience on streaming as much as Better Man does. Number 1, Drive Away Dolls. While few were expecting Drive Away Dolls to be a runaway box office smash, the fact that it was directed by half of one of cinema's most iconic filmmaking duos suggested it would do just fine. This oddball crime caper was written and directed by Ethan Coen, but even the Coen brothers' regular cult of fans largely elected to stay home for this one, with the film posting the siblings' worst box office for a wide theatrical release in more than 30 years. Drive Away Dolls settled at just $7.9 million globally. A disastrous result for a film that was marketed as a fun, kooky ride, yet ultimately proved polarizing with general audiences, landing a mediocre C cinema score. It's been a little less than a year since Drive Away Dolls was released, and yet you couldn't be blamed for having forgotten about its very existence entirely. Within the grand pantheon of the Coens' collective filmography, this film is a messy footnote. Not bad, but not particularly good either.